The other side of Tommy, and those of you who know him are probably wondering, like I did, what other side of Tommy? He is an elected official, a public servant. This is what he loves to do. But we did want to try to give a glimpse into some other parts of his life that maybe everyone wasn't so used to. And so doing that, we were looking at his family because we figured we had to go to someone who knew him before he could talk. And so our first speaker today is going to be his aunt, Liz Trainer, who's going to talk a little bit about Tommy before I knew him, and I know a lot of you have known him a really long time, but maybe even before some of you knew him. So please welcome Liz Trainer.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I've known Tommy a long time. His whole life. It's been said, that many values and ideals are learned when you're a child. You pick it up in your childhood, in your formative years. Well, I'd like to tell you something about Tommy's childhood. Affectionately, recalling Tommy during his early years was such an easy thing to do. Although I received some help from his mother, my sister, who said that as an infant, he rolled over in his crib much earlier than most babies do. And if you knew him, you'll realize that he wanted to get on with life. And he was such a cutie. As you see him today, darting from one meeting to another, you may assume that he was also an energetic child. Well, you'd be right. As a toddler, he'd squirm in my arms until I put him down, and then he'd run off to play. The nuns at St. Margaret Mary were strict, and they placed the desks in straight rows. Like nuns do, they were always so particular. But the row that Tommy was in was always out of line. And he'd always get in trouble. He'd squirm and fidgeted. Some children take gymnastics so they can learn to do some of the things that Tommy was a natural at, like standing on his hands. I can always and still see him standing on his hands. When he was a little kid, he would be anywhere and he'd just spring up on his hands, stand on his head. When we were together as a family at holiday time, with like at Thanksgiving or Christmas, we'd be all visiting, and there would be Tommy standing on his head. I don't know if you still can. And also, I remember that his mother told me this. I didn't know this, but that a fence was no obstacle for him. If he was coming home from school, he would just hop right over the fence. No gate. He didn't need a gate to get anywhere. He just went right over the fence. And he liked sports, but he didn't seem just totally interested in them. But he did hang out with his dad a lot when he went to basketball practice. He was a coach at Harlandale High School. And that was probably mostly his extent of sports. And going back a little bit, when he was a little kid, he didn't need training wheels. Like most kids need training wheels when they're learning to ride a bike. One day he just got on a bike and rode off. He showed that he had confidence. That was one of his ways of showing confidence. He enjoyed having friends around. They had a clubhouse in the backyard, and his friends and he, lots of neighbor kids, and they would play marbles and games and just hang out. And maybe that's where he learned how to exude some of his leadership skills. I don't know. Okay. As he reached high school, my husband took him along to some salvage yards looking for Model A parts for our Model A. And since he's grown up, he has a 1930s International truck and a Model A. So maybe it kind of, rubbed off on him. In high school, he was a homecoming king, 2 years running. he and a group of friends wanted to run for, the student council, and so they had a slate. They had a slate, and they had a, well, I lost my place. Oh yeah. They ran on a ticket that called themselves the Caretakers. Now that sounds like Tommy today. He's a caretaker of the community. I don't think they won, but even though losing this, he may have had wet his whistle for future leadership, for future public service. And oh boy, around that time, my husband introduced him and some friends to a mutual friend who had started the Young Democrats, and I think it probably was around the time of Hubert Humphrey. Okay, thinking back to that time, the rest was history.